Continuing our discussion on economic crimes, we're going to turn to white-collar crimes. And white-collar crimes defined by the FBI, and there are still some varying definitions among the experts, but according to the FBI, white-collar crime is any business-related act that uses deceit, deception, or dishonesty to carry out a criminal enterprise. Examples: embezzlement, tax evasion, employee theft, bribery, kickbacks, identity theft. There's various computer crimes. Fraud is a big one. These acts or crimes are not restricted to the powerful and wealthy as they previously had back when it was first identified as white-collar crime, but all social classes now can engage in white-collar crime. But a lot of the focus is going to be on the more powerful and the upper middle class, wealthy individuals is what the examples we're going to focus on here. But again, anybody can engage in a fraud or a internet crime or computer crime. And these are not victimless crimes either, right? A single scam on the internet can destroy a company, devastate families. It can wipe out their life savings, cost investors billions of dollars, even all three, combination of the three. Today's fraud schemes are well more sophisticated than they ever have been. How much white-collar crime do you think takes place annually? Well, just today, there are 10 cases on the FBI's website list. There's more. I only copied down a handful. But in the past 2 weeks, there has to be dozens. Here's just a couple of the headlines from the FBI's website. 60 defendants charged with $300 million national telemarketing fraud scheme. Rhode Island man pleads guilty to fraudulently seeking $4.7 million in COVID-19 stimulus loan. Pharmacist sentenced for presenting forged prescriptions for opioid and anti-malaria prescription drugs. Former office manager sentenced to prison for defrauding Warner Robins Georgia business, a Warner Robins Georgia business of $1.4 million. So as you can see, that's just today. Handful cases right there. The estimate cost of white-collar crime in the U.S. is over $600 billion, and it's by far more than street-level or blue-collar crimes. So let's talk about some of these crimes. Let's talk about business frauds and swindles. These occur when someone uses his business position to trick others out of their money. Swindle is to use deception, lies to trick someone, or to obtain something that is not theirs. When, for example, someone lie to a little old lady and tell them that you're selling, Florida condo, but you're really selling them nothing. Happens all the time. You can Google that fact pattern and find lots of specific examples. Ponzi schemes. It's a swindle. So what is it? Where does it originate from? Generally, it's a fraudulent investment operation that pay out returns to investors from money paid in by subsequent investors, rather than from an actual profit earned from the operation of the business. The money isn't invested. It is used to pay those already in the scheme. It works until you can't get any more investors, or too many investors that are already in are asking for their money back for a payout. And that's exactly what happened to Bernie Madoff, probably one of the most famous Ponzi schemes, and it's part of this week's assignment if you choose this one. It's very fascinating. I find the Ponzi schemes very fascinating. The Ponzi scheme term is named after Charles Ponzi. He's was deemed the creator, even though these kinds of schemes have gone way back. It just now has a name. They named it after somebody. But it goes back to the 1920s where it gets its name from. He had an investment idea in postage stamps kind of scheme, promising 50% return when the market was only returning 5% at the time. Another example of Ponzi scheme, June 27th, 2007. Former boy band mogul Lou Pearlman. He created the Backstreet Boys and NSYNC. He was indicted by grand jury on several counts of fraud and money laundering, which was what he was doing was running a $500 million Ponzi scheme over the course of 20 years. He was ultimately sentenced to 25 years in prison. You may have heard the term pyramid scheme. It refers to money collected from newer victims of the fraud to pay earlier victims to provide a veneer of legitimacy. What happens is the victims themselves are induced to recruit victims through the payment of recruitment commissions. That's another term for it, pyramid scheme, because it's shaped like a pyramid. More people at the bottom paying those smaller up at the top. Telemarketing swindles. When you send money to people you do not know personally or give out your personal or financial information to unknown callers, you increase your chances of becoming a victim of telemarketing fraud. Generally, this kind of crime targets the elderly. Here are some warning signs of telemarketing fraud. What a caller may tell you. This is actually from the FBI, and I noticed they're in their book too, the same exact list from the FBI. So I'm only going to read a couple. You must act now, or the offer won't be good. Anything that requires you to act on a moment's notice is probably not a good idea. You can't afford to miss this high profit, no risk offer. You don't need any information about the company or our references. You must send money, give a credit card or bank account number, or have a check picked up. If you've heard these things before, be careful. Or if you hear similar lines, just say, no thanks, hang up. Chiseling, another form of a white-collar crime. It's using illegal means to cheat an organization, its consumers, or both, on a regular basis. Examples would be charging for bogus services, selling knockoffs in place of the real item, overbilling. There's two types: professional chiseling, financial chiseling. The professional, where someone uses their profession to defraud clients, and it's based on their unique position in the profession that allows them to do so. Example, pharmacist who substitutes low-costing drugs with high-costing drugs, but they actually charge the high-cost price to the client. The client thinks they're getting the high-cost drugs. They're really not. They're getting the low one. A jeweler who swaps out a diamond from a ring. You wouldn't know the difference. Financial chiseling. The one profession where a lot of chiseling happens is in the financial industry. Stockbrokers, mortgage brokers, bankers. They can engage in deceptive schemes to chisel money out of their clients. They mislead them into investments. They promote risky investments so they can get a higher kickback from the stock or the fund. Insider trading is a form of chiseling. It's a type of securities fraud too. When insiders, quote unquote, people inside the business, they use their position to buy and sell securities. They use information that they obtained because of their position that was not made available to the public. And they make a profit. Either they sell and they haven't lost anything, or they buy low because they know something's going to be on the rise. So professional chiseling, financial chiseling. Exploitation. When someone uses their position to extort people to make an illegal profit. It's using the person's vulnerability to take advantage of them. A code enforcer doesn't give a business permit unless the business owner pays him or her a sum of money. Like that business owner needs the permit to operate and run their business. They're absolutely entitled to that permit, but the code enforcer is like, yeah, why don't you give me an extra $5,000 in my pocket and we can write you up your permit right now, right? Exploitation. The example in the book, by the way, of the officer from immigration, perfect example of exploitation. Influencing. Influence peddling, I should say, and it's usually under the guise of bribery. It's the use of position or political influence on someone's behalf in exchange for money or favors. It's a form of bribery. We talked about political corruption in government. It also exists in business. But let's talk about bribery and tie it in here. There's 3 types of bribery: public officials, commercial bribery, bribery of foreign officials. This is the bribery of foreign officials is a federal crime under the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act. Check out page 420 in the book. There's a number of recent examples of businesses who were charged with influence peddling or bribing foreign officials. Public officials, bribery, public officials, just what it says, attempt to influence a public official to act in a way that serves a private interest in a crime. So anything the recipient considers of value. Who's the public official? As we know, it could be someone who's elected office or appointed to the office. Examples could, a mayor, city council person, even a district attorney and a judge. The crime takes place when the bribe is made or after it's completed, because then you'd have two people involved after it's completed. But at least you need somebody bribing an official. But, the official taking favors is a form of influence peddling. It's not an actual criminal charge called influence peddling. It's tied into some form of bribery. Commercially, for businesses, commercial bribery, this is done usually to obtain proprietary information, cover up an inferior product or maybe secure a new business. So if we have Rosemary, who works for this telecom company, she offers Craig, who's an employee over at their competitor, QMC Services, offers to pay him some money in exchange for getting some trade secrets. That would be a form of influence peddling. Employee fraud and embezzlement, employee theft, employees who steal from their employers or their coworkers. That's what it is, and it's very common. Why? Why would employees steal from each other and their employers? Depends on who you ask. If you ask the workers, they say it's due to strain or some sort of conflict. If you ask the employers, they say, for economic reasons. They needed money. Management fraud, another workplace crime. It can constitute a whole number of things, including concealing information, fraudulently receiving personal benefits or personal raises, manipulating accounts. Management fraud can be defined as the deliberate misrepresentation of the financial condition of an enterprise, accomplished through the intentional misstatement or omission of amounts or disclosures in a financial statement in order to deceive financial statement users. This happens all the time. There are a number of cases involving management fraud. Usually a number of other criminal charges go along with it. Enron, that's the case that's described in the book. That's always one of the first examples that's given when you're talking about management fraud. Enron was forced to reduce their earnings, restate their earnings by approximately $600 million because of improper financial reporting. Enron's top management had been hiding debt and losses. 2 of the top management CEOs went to prison. One passed away due to natural causes. But Enron took a very big blow. Lots of people lost their livelihood and their money because they invested stocks in this what they thought was growing company. It was a very sad case, along with Bernie Madoff's case. Terrible. Embezzlement. This is fraudulent taking or takeover of money or other property by a person to whom it has been entrusted. Usually this is an example of an employee who steals money from a business, like office manager. How's it different from larceny? The wrongdoer does not actually need to physically take the property from the possession of another, like you need with theft. If it's a business manager, they can just shuffle the accounts around and put a little extra in their account. But take this example, not in the book, but I like to use this example to distinguish. While hauling a load of refrigerators from San Diego to New York in a truck owned by National Appliance Company, Fred tries to sell some of the refrigerators. To display them, Fred breaks the seals, enters the cargo compartment, and opens 2 refrigerator cartons. There he sells them, and he pockets the $1,000. Classic example of embezzlement, right? Somebody gave him the refrigerators, entrusted the refrigerators in his care, and then he went and sold them, right? He took them over. Example 2, nobody buys the refrigerators. All the same facts. He's hauling refrigerators San Diego to New York in a truck. It's owned by National Appliance Company. Fred tries to sell some refrigerators. To display them, he breaks the seal, enters the cargo compartment, opens 2 refrigerator cartons, but he has no luck. Nobody buys them. And they never leave the truck. Fred's arrested and charged with embezzlement. Fred argues there is no grounds for the charge because he never took anything off the truck. Is he right? The answer is no. If a person has control over the property of another and has the intent of converting, selling, right, the goods to his own use, that's embezzlement. The key is somebody entrusted you with that property. So embezzlement versus theft. You don't have to take. You don't have to take. Client fraud. Lots of fraud. There's so many different examples of fraud. Corporate fraud, securities fraud, mortgage fraud, insurance fraud, mass marketing fraud, welfare fraud, healthcare fraud, and tons of other different types of fraud. Fraud involves cheating an organization, intentionally make false statements, or misrepresent information in order to receive payment you're not entitled to, collect services that weren't rendered, or you just don't pay for services. Fraud. Let's talk specifically about healthcare fraud. It's healthcare fraud, Medicaid fraud, Medicare fraud, very common. It's probably one of the reasons why health insurance is so high, because healthcare providers engage in fraud. They make false statements. They give misinformation so they can gain clients who may or may not need care, and they administer treatment whether needed or not. There are also patients who also commit fraud in order to obtain service. It's said that the healthcare fraud costs the United States $80 billion a year. According to the FBI, one of the most significant trends in recent healthcare fraud cases includes the willingness of medical professionals to risk patient harm in their schemes. These cases involve healthcare providers who conduct unnecessary surgeries, prescribe dangerous drugs without medical necessity, and engage in abusive and substandard care practices. Other schemes involve fraudulent billing services not rendered and upcoding the charges for services provided. There are a number of other examples in the book, and healthcare fraud, like I said, is way too common. And we have tax evasion, another type of fraud. A person or entity deliberately avoids paying their true tax liability. That's the basic definition. The victim is the government, and the government is the one who has to prove the case. So to establish a case for tax evasion under the Internal Revenue Code, the government must prove that the taxpayer attempted to evade or defeat a tax that was due and owing, and that the taxpayer acted willfully. So underreported income or did not report income, and they did so willfully. What does that mean? Somebody acts willfully when they know they have to do something, like pay taxes, and they choose voluntarily and intentionally disregarding paying the taxes altogether, or they may take steps to avoid it and get around it. And they call that evading or defeating the tax. So they took steps, keeping double books, making false entries, destroying records, tax evasion, avoiding paying taxes. Corporate crime, again, another general collection of crimes make up corporate crime, and we will discuss a few of them. Generally, a corporate crime can be defined as a violation of a criminal statute either by a corporate entity or by its executives, employees, or agents' action on behalf of and for the benefit of the corporation or other business entity. Could be a partnership. These crimes come in many forms, ranging from prior knowledge about products' defects to price fixing. Others include false advertisement, violating environmental laws, and illegal restraint on trade. Illegal restraint on trade, which finds its laws under the federal law and the Sherman Antitrust Act. At the most basic level, restraint of trade is any activity that prevents another party from conducting business as they normally would without such restraint. For instance, two businesses agreeing to fix prices in order to put another competitor out of business is an illegal restraint of trade. Other examples include creating a monopoly, coercing another party to stop competing with your business, or unlawfully interfering with a business deal. Congress passed the Sherman Antitrust Act in 1890. The Sherman Act aims to eliminate restraints on trade and competition. States also have laws against restraints of trade that have the ones that strictly impact local business. A recent case involved a federal investigation of the computer software giant Microsoft. Competitors complained that Microsoft used illegal arrangements with buyers to ensure that its disk operating system would be installed in nearly 80% of the world's computers. That's an example. Deceptive, or an attempt at an example. I don't recall the outcome of what happened with Microsoft. There was a lot of hearings on it. I think it was under investigation, but I'm not quite sure it went any distance in the criminal world. But that is an example of what would draw a red flag to trying to create a monopoly or to restrain trade. Deceptive pricing, another corporate crime. In order to secure a bid, for an example, in order to secure a bid for a job, a contractor will provide the government or the business with incomplete or misleading information intentionally. They do it intentionally. On how much it would cost to complete the job or fulfill the contract on which they are bidding on. Or, once they have the job, they might use mischarges, meaning that they may charge for something that they did do and they needed to do, or they didn't, or they charge for something they said needed done and then didn't do. So deceptive pricing, and businesses do this as well. False claims advertising. False advertising is the use of false, misleading, or unproven information to advertise products to consumers. One form of false advertising is to claim that a product has a health benefit or contains vitamins or minerals that, in fact, it does not. And it's the Food and Drug Administration that governs these kinds of activities. Other things that fall under false advertising is manipulating photos, especially with cosmetic and weight loss commercials, omitting information, skipping over important information, not disclosing hidden fees and surcharges that are common, that whole fine print in the fine print in the advertising. So these are just a overview of white collar crimes in their general sense. There are lots more. We're going to turn next to green collar crimes, which are a form or under the umbrella of white collar crimes, but we can refer to them as green collar crimes or environmental crimes, but they're up next.